She froze when a man stepped through the fundraiser doors and scanned the room with a careful, measured face. Betrayal tightened her jaw before she could move. The word rose in her chest and shaped everything she would do that night. Maya had built the evening into a modest ritual, a table by the windows, a warm coat, the satchel with receipts. But nothing in her plans prepared her for that single entry. The man wore a coat cut to hide his shoulders, a slim watch, and the old wedding band low on his finger. Recognition hit her like metal. Daniel, she heard Lena say behind her, but the name came out small, as if the word itself might wobble. The crowd continued to laugh in the hall, oblivious, while Maya felt the whole point of the night collapse into one human confrontation. Maya moved before she decided to move. She let Lena guide her through the foyer, fingers on her elbow, and kept her voice even. Lena, go on. I'll step outside for a minute, Maya. The sentence held the public calm she had practiced for years. Betrayal burned in her hands when she smoothed the front of her coat. She touched the thin gold locket under her scarf to remind herself she still owned this body and these choices. Lena squeezed her wrist. Maya, are you sure? I'm fine, Maya. Her answer was short, measured. She turned the phrase into a shield, because she had learned to move first and explain later. They reached the refreshment table where Marcus offered more wine and a soft question. Marcus smiled with a neighborly ease, but Maya felt every pair of eyes shift to the man who had stopped not far from the entrance. Daniel stepped through the crowd as if he belonged to the space between the chairs, not to the years that had passed. Marcus, Maya, do you know him? I do, she replied. The first lines of the conflict were sharp and concrete. Her husband had left on their anniversary, and now he stood in a room full of neighbors who had offered pity or turned away when it happened. The stakes were immediate: to answer or to walk away, to demand an explanation or to protect the life she had rebuilt. Daniel closed distance the way a trained man crosses a room, measured steps, small scan of those nearby. He stopped by a display table with pamphlets, one hand resting on the worn leather briefcase at his side. Maya watched him place his palm flat on the table as if that contact anchored him. Suspicion rose in her throat. She had believed absence meant erasure, but his presence suggested a different problem: return, purpose, and intention. Lena pulled Maya toward the side corridor, and Maya felt the pulse of the fundraiser around them, voices like soft instruments. She let Lena steer her, but every step angled toward Daniel. At the corridor, Tom, the building manager, emerged with an envelope in hand like an object of quiet importance. He held it without theatrics. His face was careful and apologetic. This came in for you earlier, Tom, and he set the sealed envelope on a table between them. Maya took it as if it might be hot. The envelope bore no name written in long script, no stamp of return, only a folded photocopied ledger and a small, typed note. Her fingers trembled when she slid the flap. The flat papers inside showed a sequence of payments and dates arranged in neat rows. Each entry matched months after Daniel's disappearance. The ledger contained deposit receipts, and at the bottom of the photocopy a short line read, "Support held discreetly." Maya felt a first shift. Anger sharpened into confusion. She had prepared to blame him for leaving. She had not prepared for evidence that someone had quietly paid to keep her steady. Daniel had watched Tom hand the papers across the corridor. He did not put distance between himself and the envelope. Instead, he folded his hands behind his back and let the hush settle. "Maya," he said when she stepped back into the foyer, and his voice landed in the open air. Daniel's baritone had not softened. It carried the restraint of a man who had practiced economy in speech. "Maya, I didn't mean for any of this to happen the way it did." Maya paused. The second emotional change came quickly, from suspicion to a tentative, cautious curiosity. She wanted to tear the ledger into pieces, but a part of her wanted to read every line and find the truth written in dates and small numbers. Lena watched the exchange with her hands clasped. "Maya, talk to him out here," Lena urged, using a tone that mixed practical worry and a wife's protection for a friend. Marcus hovered a few feet away, a neighbor choosing a side with his posture. Tom stood by the wall as if he had delivered more than papers. He had placed a new possibility into the room. Guests drifted closer, drawn by tension. Maya's breath came deliberate and controlled. She let Daniel speak first. I would have told you if I could. I tried to leave signs. I paid. I watched from afar." His sentences were clipped. He avoided eye contact in a way that sharpened Maya's distrust. "Daniel, that's not an explanation, Maya." The words were short and exact. They moved to the entrance steps where winter air sliced at the doorway, thin and wet with a late autumn cool. Daniel followed rather than fled. He placed himself at the edge of the crowd like a man waiting for permission to be allowed back into a room he had abandoned. A neighbor called softly something about the fundraiser schedule, and the sound dissolved into the background. Maya opened the photocopy and read a line aloud, voice steady. "Deposit November 3rd, $500. She looked up at Daniel. "Who sent this?" she demanded. Her voice carried over the gravel and into the hall. He hesitated. There was a small gesture where he brushed his thumb over the worn ring. That act was private and loud at once. It complicated her anger with a new, private proof that his fingers had not given up the token of their marriage. Daniel spoke in short bursts then, each sentence a brittle attempt at coherence. I couldn't face you then. I thought leaving would solve things. I was wrong. Maya's reaction was a hard tilt toward anger. You left us on our anniversary and you think I'm sorry is enough. Lena, Maya, don't let him pin you down here. Marcus stepped forward. Daniel, what's your name on those deposits? Who arranged them? Daniel looked at Marcus, then at Tom. No one I can name. I asked someone to help. I couldn't risk a call that would find you. The exchange forced a public inventory of choices. The betrayal stretched into new questions about control and secrecy. A sudden movement split the conversation. Tom walked to the edge of the steps and held up another paper, a photocopy with an account number that matched several of the deposits. This envelope came with that. Tom. Someone me to hand it directly to her if she attended. Maya stared at the slips. The dates matched months when her rent was tight, months when she had refused offers from relatives and kept her pride. Her hands tightened around the papers. The third emotion, shifts or confusion, hardened into a cold, targeted anger. Whoever did this thought they could buy me back into silence. Daniel shook his head. No. I thought I was protecting you. I thought you would be safer without me making constant promises I couldn't keep. His phrasing sounded like a man explaining a calculation, not a man speaking to a person. The crowd around them had split into clusters. Neighbors whispered and pointed with lowered voices. Maya's voice rose and then steadied in an action-driven rhythm. Maya, listen to me. Daniel, I'm telling you the truth now. She cut him off. Tell me why you left on our anniversary and closed every line of contact. Tell me why you didn't answer Lena's calls. Tell me why you left a note nowhere. And then, her sentence stopped because a voice from the hall interrupted. Marcus, Tom, who signed for those payments when they arrived. Tom replied. It was logged as anonymous. The envelope was handed to me through the manager's office. The clarity shifted the field. A new fact arrived that would change how Maya understood both absence and the payments. Daniel's jaw tightened. He ran a fingertip along his coat as if feeling the seam might steady him. Maya, I worked the nights. I moved to a small job in the city. I couldn't explain my reasons without risking you seeing me fail. He used short phrases that sounded like a man laying out logistics instead of confessing feelings. Maya stepped closer and spoke with a brittle, precise tone. You left a life we made together, Daniel. You erased yourself from our calendar, from birthdays, from the months I stood by the mailbox waiting for a note. Daniel's reply was the first real admission. I thought I could fix what I was making worse by staying. Lena, Maya, he can't undo that by showing up now. The remark landed and shifted the mood. Neighbors who had been curious now edged into judgment. Tom cleared his throat and produced one more paper from the envelope. A fax statement showing a set of transfers with a forwarding email partially visible. The email name was unfamiliar, but the address line had a hidden tag referencing a small service Daniel had once used. Maya lifted her gaze to Daniel, and for a moment his face was the most readable thing in the room. Daniel, who handled this for you? She asked. He swallowed. The following exchange turned sharp and raw. It functioned as the chapter's mid-cliffhanger. Daniel, tell me now. Maya, I didn't want you to see me like this. Daniel answered. Who? Marcus demanded. Daniel's shoulders hunched. I asked a man named Victor to help. He'd keep it quiet. He'd make sure you never had to worry about rent or groceries. Lena, Maya, Victor. Do you know that name? Maya recognized the name as one from an old story in the neighborhood, a fixer who handled favors, discreet but expensive. Her throat closed. The new detail rearranged the earlier facts. Daniel's departure was not a simple flight, but tied to people willing to hide money and movement. The crowd tightened as the conversation turned public and accusatory. Daniel tried then to say something softer. Maya, I never stopped thinking about you. I paid what I could. I watched from a distance because I thought distance would be less damaging than chaos. Maya's voice cut across him. You call it protection. I call it removal. You removed me from the life you promised. The argument intensified. There were 3 rapid exchanges between them that snapped like short ropes. Daniel, why didn't you call? Because I was ashamed. Shame is not an excuse. I know that now. Each line came quick, short and exact. The public exchange forced both of them to act. Daniel to explain, Maya to accuse. Daniel's control cracked at the steps. He moved closer and, for the first time that night, let his guard drop in a visible, physical way. He lifted his hand and showed the inside of his palm where the wedding band sat low and scuffed. The gesture was simple and private, but it held weight. Maya looked at the band and felt her anger tilt toward a different axis. Grief that someone still clutched a mark of what they had shared. Tom stepped forward and said, Maya, you deserve to see these papers. You deserve an answer. Marcus extended his phone as if to record the moment, and Lena's fingers pressed into Maya's wrist enough to make the skin ache. The crowd's attention made everything louder. Daniel's voice broke. I thought I was saving you from my life. I thought I made the wrong choice, but I did not mean to vanish the way I did. His sentence hung. The silence that followed counted as the chapter's peak. Maya's legs refused to tremble inward. The final confrontation unfolded in short, direct bursts. She held the ledger in front of her like proof, and then she did something she had not planned. She read a line that revealed a date months after his departure where a payment was followed by a brief change in the amount. This says someone increased the support after January. Who made that call? Daniel looked at Tom, at Marcus, then at Lena. I can't produce a name that you will accept. I talk to people. I made mistakes by trusting the wrong man. I should have come home and explained. Maya pressed the papers into his hands. Daniel, you bear this. Tell me now and tell them here. The public demand forced him to choose between shame and truth. He inhaled fast and then began to speak in short, clipped sentences that sounded like a man exposing a wound. The climax tightened into a concrete decision. Daniel finally collapsed into broader words and took responsibility in a way he had not before. I left because I couldn't pay my debts, and I thought I would come back with a plan. I thought the absence would protect you. Victor handled payments, not me directly. I handed him money and a list. I thought I could fix it without telling you. I was wrong. 3 to 6 short lines pulsed between them. Daniel, why didn't you call Lena? I tried. I couldn't. Why would you trust Victor? Because I needed help fast. You chose wrong. I know. The sequence was direct and sharp. Neighbors glanced away. The fundraiser's noise resumed like a tide going out and returning. After the admission, the immediate fallout required action. Maya folded the papers back into the envelope without ceremony. She looked at Daniel with a face that had learned the exact muscles to show when someone must leave. Daniel, she said, I will not be quiet while you make explanations for what you did. I rebuilt my life the months you left. I protected the nights and mornings my work lets me keep. Lena stepped up and placed a steady hand on Maya's shoulder. Marcus positioned himself to block the path should Daniel try to follow. Tom moved back behind them as if to give both parties room. Daniel reached out as if to touch her arm. Maya stepped away. His hand stopped in the air. The decision landed in the cold. Hers was a short, decisive action. She turned and walked down the steps. She walked alone under the amber streetlights, the locket cold against her sternum and the sealed envelope in her other hand. The walk was not poetic, it was practical. She kept a steady pace, counted steps to keep from trembling, and avoided looking at reflections in the shop windows. The final paragraphs make a clear, concrete beat. Maya reached the lane lined with bare trees, paused beneath a lamp, and opened the envelope once more. Inside the ledger lay a note folded small and precise. She read a short line. I wanted to spare you the sight of my failures. The sentence explained nothing but confirmed motive. He had tried to protect by removing himself. Her emotions had shifted from anger to a cold, resolute clarity about boundary. She folded the note and slid it back into the envelope as she continued down the lane. As Maya walked, Lena's voice over her phone rang like a small tether. Maya, are you sure? Lena, yes. Maya answered into the phone, voice even and small. Lena, I choose my life tonight. The call ended. She crossed to the narrow path that led home, measured steps on wet leaves, and then a new sound. A knock came from a porch she had just passed, single and deliberate. Maya stopped, the envelope pressed against her ribs. The knock connected directly to what had happened at the fundraiser. It was a fresh, situational beat that promised another decision. She turned back toward the sound and walked at a pace that signaled a choice, not a collapse. She kept her hand on the locket and tightened fingers around the envelope as she approached the house where the knock had come from. The chapter closes on that physical motion, Maya moving toward a door, and the possibility of another confrontation. The ledger, the note, Tom's delivery, Marcus's questions, Lena's steadiness, all had shifted the night's meaning. Betrayal had set the evening in motion, suspicion changed into a demand for truth, and confusion had resolved into controlled action. Maya's choice to step away in public, and then to approach a new knock at the porch leaves a concrete, audible hinge for the next scene. She did not speak to the listeners. She moved to the door, fingers hesitating over the knocker, and lifted her hand to answer. Maya's hand stalled on the brass deadbolt when Daniel Hayes stepped into the atelier doorway and spoke her name under the lamplight. Suspicion tightened the line of her mouth before she had time to think. Maya, Daniel. His voice the same controlled baritone she remembered and threaded with something like urgency. He did not reach for her. He stood framed in the doorway as if testing whether the frame still fit him. She jerked the key back into the lock and let the bolt click solid. The studio smelled of turpentine and cold tea, a shelf of stacked canvases catching the last of the evening light. Maya moved around a table of drying sketches while she kept her eyes on him. Each step was deliberate. Within 5 seconds she had decided what she would allow and where she would hold the line. Why are you here? Maya, putting words between them as a guard. Her voice was low and steady. Daniel answered with a folded hand and a small movement of shoulders that suggested explanation coming but not yet offered. This was not the first time he had returned into her orbit since he vanished on their anniversary. At the fundraiser months earlier he had walked into the room, scanned the crowd with a measured face, and she had pressed her palm against the table until a napkin creased under her fingers. That sight had lodged itself in her head as plain fact. He could appear in a public room as if he belonged. He could choose whether to speak to her or not, She had left the table early that night. Claire arrived at the front counter with a stack of invoices and a crossbody lamp still clipped to her belt. Claire's arrival made the doorway feel smaller. Maya. Claire, and then, seeing Daniel, she straightened and set the invoices down like a shield. You can't just come in, Daniel. This is private property. Her rhythm in speech had the quick edges Maya had come to trust. Claire tended to name the immediate boundary and then close it. Daniel shifted his weight. I'm sorry. I didn't mean to startle you. He kept his hands visible, one palm flat against the doorframe. Maya noted the small gestures. She had learned to read his motion the way she read brushstrokes. I only need to talk for 5 minutes. Please. Maya glanced at Claire, and then at the worktable where a half-finished landscape leaned against a jar of brushes. The studio had been a slow rebuild after the anniversary. Each painting had been both work and a test. She could refuse him. She could call the police. Instead, she picked up a rag and wiped a smear of paint from a jar, making the motion a small, contained reply. You can't have 5 minutes in here, Claire. Maya, let's lock up and talk outside. Claire's voice was practical, the tone of someone who managed lists and people with equal patience. Her presence narrowed the space further, and Daniel's jaw hardened. He produced a small object, as if he had rehearsed the move. A flash of gold caught the lamp's light, Maya's thin gold locket worn on its chain. He unfolded a folded paper as well, creased and yellowed at the edges. The sight of the locket made something in Maya's chest shift. She had kept that locket close for years, an unannounced weathered presence against her skin. Where did you get that? Maya, without stepping forward. Her voice went sharp on the last word. Daniel held the locket between his thumb and forefinger, careful not to touch the chain. I found it in a box at my sister's apartment, he said. I kept the letter with it. I never mailed it. I wanted you to have it. He set the folded paper on the counter. The paper trembled slightly under his fingers. Claire moved between them. You can't hand things over and expect that to fix what happened. Daniel, you left. You vanished. Tell her why you left outside the door. Claire's sentences came in 3 short strikes. Daniel inhaled. I thought being gone would keep you safe. I thought being gone would keep whatever followed me away from you. He spoke as if naming the cause would make it smaller. He avoided saying what followed meant. Maya's suspicion intensified into a different tone, doubt that rose into anger. She folded her arms and let her jaw clamp. Maya forced the sequence into questions. She stepped close enough to the counter that the lamplight picked out the small scar near her left eyebrow. You left on our anniversary. You did not call. For 2 years you did not send a postcard. What made you think silence keeps anyone safe? The question was a physical jab, precise and unsparing. Daniel's fingers ran along the edge of his coat. There were people from before, entanglements I didn't want to bring to you. I thought running was the safer choice. I thought I could fix it alone. His mouth tightened as he spoke. Maya watched him measure a confession. Claire cut in, or you ran because it was easier. Which is it, Daniel? Her tone left no space for evasions. Daniel looked at Claire and then at Maya. For a moment his control slipped, and his eyes widened. Tom arrived without announcement. He had been on the next call, and walked in carrying a sealed envelope. He laid the envelope on the worktable with the deliberate calm of a man who handled documents for a living. Certified mail served to Maya Bennett. Tom, eyes meeting Maya's. Divorce decree enclosed. The paper buzzed with official weight. Maya's mouth formed a single breath and let it out slow. The legal finality landed in the room like a concrete fact. Daniel's face unrolled from guarded to startled. He reached immediately for the envelope as if he could rewrite the stamp with his fingers. So it's over, Daniel. The attempt at softness did not match the tightening in his hands. He stepped forward the width of the table, then stopped when Claire planted her foot between them. The atmosphere shifted. The suspicion in Maya's chest broadened into a hard clarity. He could claim motives, but paperwork would not be unserved. The conversation became a sequence of small, precise moves. Maya folded the letter into her palm and smoothed the paper's edge. She felt the loop of the locket as a memory under her fingers even though it was on the counter. Her body reacted. A tightening of the throat, a steadiness in the shoulders, a refusal not to let her voice shake. Daniel tried again. Maya, I can explain. I kept this letter because I couldn't bring myself to send it. I thought if I came back and... He stopped. He had practiced some sentence that now failed him. I thought I could ask for your forgiveness. He finished. The words hung and did not change the fact of the envelope before him. Ask for forgiveness, Maya repeated. His name, Daniel, you left our life. You left our house. You did not tell me it was for my safety. You no one, not me. Not our family. Her voice was neither quiet nor loud. It was the pitch of someone cataloging facts. Claire set her palms on the edge of the counter. Maya, do you want him removed now? I will call the surgeon Ivy worked with. We'll handle it cleanly. Claire's clarity was a visible hedge around Maya. That offer tightened the air further. Legal process at one end and Daniel's strained hope at the other. Daniel looked at Claire. Please. I'm not here to cause trouble. I need to explain what I learned. I thought staying away would stop what I was running from. He used the word, learned, as if it were a shield. Maya watched him for a minute, and listened to the way his breath hitched once on the word. An afternoon neighbor, Mrs. Henley, peered from her stoop across the street, and then moved closer with an expression that measured scandal. The presence of neighbors watching made everything more public and immediate. Daniel's shoulders sagged at being under sight. Under the counter light, Daniel opened the folded paper and read a single paragraph aloud. His voice was flat and precise. As he read, his hands minimized the motion so the words fell like recorded facts. Dates, a last contact, a threat hinted at in clipped language. I thought staying with you would drag this to you. I signed papers I thought would let me handle it alone. He did not invent new names or invoke mystical enemies. He offered a few names of men tied to his past career but refused to expand on details. Maya heard specifics, the name of a company that had once employed Daniel, a city where he'd spent long days, a ledger line of favors owed. Those were concrete things. They did not absolve him of leaving. They explained a choice he had made for reasons he thought practical. Claire, the exact question. Why didn't you tell Alina, your sister? Why did you cut us all out? Claire's voice was direct. Daniel swallowed. I thought my silence would spare you both. I didn't realize silence would look like abandonment. The last word slowly. Maya took the locket in her hand. It felt like metal and a hinge and a faint fingerprint inside. She opened it. The inside held a tiny photograph of them at some unremarkable summer fair, Maya in a denim jacket, Daniel laughing with his head back. She kept her thumb on the photograph for a long beat, and did not let the photograph do the work of making her forgive. Tension built as witnesses accumulated. Tom stayed at the table and made notes on the service. Mrs. Henley shifted from curiosity to opinion. Claire called 2 mutual friends who answered and then said they would come by in the morning. Each phone call made the situation a series of factual links that made Daniel's story less private and more a series of choices he had set into motion. Then a small, undeniable inconsistency in Daniel's timeline emerged. Claire found it in a message thread on Daniel's phone, an old booking confirmation for a flight dated 3 months after the anniversary. Daniel had said he had been always moving, always careful to avoid leaving traces. The flight confirmation showed a return week that did not match the dates he had given them. Claire read the date into the room. This shows you were home a week after you said you weren't. Who were you with? Daniel, she demanded. Daniel's throat closed. He blinked twice and looked away. His fingers found the edge of the counter and dug a shallow crease into the wood. That small physical reaction read as guilt. He began, then stopped. He tried a different tack. I stayed in a motel the next week. I couldn't bring myself to come here and knock. The lie hung loose. Maya's expression hardened. The suspicion she had carried became anger cut with betrayal. She stepped forward and spoke his name in a clipped tone. You lied about the dates. You lied about not being near here. You didn't tell me because you chose not to. That's the truth I need to hear. His name again. Daniel, Claire, and Tom watched him. The 3 of them formed a ring of intent and consequence. Daniel's jaw worked. He had the look of a man used to controlling outcomes by choosing which facts to reveal. Now the control had slipped. You rewrite. He said finally. I lied. I thought I could hold things at arm's length. I thought I could keep you safe by never letting the truth near you. But I was afraid to tell you the names. Maya, his voice cracked on the last word. Maya's reaction was physical. She let out a breath that sounded like a small release, and then made a deliberate move. She pulled her palm from the locket and slid the chain along her fingers, then set the locket on the counter between them. Her hands did not tremble, her jaw did. The argument that followed matched the guidelines of a sharp, emotional confrontation. Daniel spoke with quick, clipped sentences. You don't understand what followed me. I had to go. If I hadn't left, they'd have taken both of us. I couldn't. Claire cut in with short lines. You left your marriage to a woman you promised to protect. You left her. That is on you. The rapid back and forth went on for 5 short exchanges marked by naming and accusation. Daniel's voice rose for the first time. You don't know what those men are capable of. He blurted. Maya replied with a calm that carried an edge. Daniel, telling me you were leaving would not have made you safer. It would have told me what you were facing. I could have chosen. You removed my choice. The words plainly. He fumbled for the wedding band on his finger and pulled it off, the metal bright against his palm. He handed it across the counter as if that motion could reverse years. The ring thudded on the wood and rolled once, stopping near Maya's elbow. Maya stared at the ring. Her fingers hovered above it, then closed into a fist. She picked it up and held it to the light. You took away our years and handed back a piece of metal, she said. You think this undoes the nights I held the infant monitor, the hospital runs, the work I rearranged. Her sentences were measured. She used specifics to mark what his absence had cost. Daniel's shoulders slumped. He tried to speak but could not find language that would change the facts. Claire watched him for a moment and then stepped back. Tom folded his arms and looked at the envelope on the table. He had done his part. Maya spoke with a voice that contained a finality bespoke of decisions made from fact rather than feeling. Each clause like a carefully placed brushstroke. I rebuilt my life here. I have clients who trust me. I have a routine. You did what you did, Daniel. I will not let you undo the life I built because you are late to regret." She paused. "Leave." Now Daniel's eyes filled briefly. He looked at the ring and then at her face. "Maya, please." I thought he began, but Maya shut him down with a single, quiet line. "Go, Maya, this conversation is over." She turned from him and walked to the back of the studio, where a battered chair waited. She sat and folded her hands in her lap so that her fingers did not fidget. The movement was small but decisive. Daniel left the way he had come in, measured steps, coat collar up, a hand lingering on the doorframe as if unwilling to close it entirely. His shoulders were not the same carriage as when he had stepped in. They carried the slump of failure. Outside, Claire moved to the stoop and escorted him off the property, speaking to him in clipped sentences that left no space for answers. Neighbors watched from porches and windows. Someone clicked a phone camera but did not voice an opinion aloud. The public attention made everything factual and visible. Rumor had not softened into private memory yet. Maya listened to the front door click and the click of footsteps recede. Her breathing was even. Alone in the studio, she slid the locket back onto its chain and set it around her neck. It rested at the hollow of her collarbone like a familiar small object that did not demand speeches. She felt the metal and the tiny photograph inside. The photograph did not ask anything of her. It only showed a moment that had been real. Elena arrived as the streetlights clicked on, carrying 2 mugs wrapped in a dish towel. She stepped inside without waiting for invitation and set a mug on the table. "Maya Elena," using her name like an anchor. Her voice had the steadiness of a sister who had seen enough to know how to hold silence. Maya looked up and touched the locket once more before letting her hand fall. "He came back," she said. "He brought the locket. He left the ring. He lied about dates." Her sentences were short and factual. Elena listened without interrupting. Elena slid into the chair opposite and offered the mug. "Good," she said. "You needed witnesses. You needed paper. You needed to see it all in daylight." Elena's practical words did not attempt to comfort with platitudes. She fed the facts back in ways that made decisions clearer. Claire stood by the door and checked the lock, then sat on a stool and rubbed her palms together. Maya opened her mouth and closed it again. She could have launched into a long list of grievances. Instead, she set the wedding band into the palm of her hand and then put it into the pocket of her coat. She did not smash it or throw it away. She placed it where it would be visible if she chose to look. The physical choice felt like a measurement rather than a manifesto. "What will you do now?" "Elena." Her question was concrete and immediate. Maya named the next steps. "Call her lawyer in the morning. Keep the studio hours. Refuse unscheduled visits. Change the locks if necessary." She each tasked like a small instrument of control. Claire added, "I'll come in tomorrow and help you sort client emails. We'll get you back on the schedule. We'll keep the place steady." Claire's promise was operational. It offered practical continuity rather than speeches. Outside, Daniel's car started and pulled away slowly. The sound of the motor left the street hollow for a moment. Maya closed her eyes briefly, felt the pulse at her wrist, and then opened them to steady herself. She rose and crossed to the front window. For a second she watched dust motes lift in the beam of a passing streetlight and then settle again on the sill. She did not make the motion of ruminating. She catalogued the next logistic move. Elena handed back the mug and stood. "Sleep here tonight?" she asked. Her tone offered both company and a boundary. Maya considered the tangible comfort of another body in the house, someone who would listen, who would call the right numbers in the morning. Maya nodded. "Yes, stay. Lock the front door when you leave in the morning." Her voice was direct. She folded a clean towel and placed it on the counter where Daniel had left the envelope and the ring. That small domestic arrangement felt less like closure and more like inventory. Claire gathered the invoices she had set aside. "I'll text you tonight with a list of clients who need notices. We'll be methodical." She left feeling precise. Tom stamped his notebook closed and offered Maya a business card for any legal aid referrals. "If you need anything, call me. I do process work around here." I saw this through. His tone was practical and unfussy. Maya listened as the apartment settled into quieter sounds. Elena's breath as she made tea in the back room, the soft scrape of a chair, the faint hum of a refrigerator. She kept the locket under her fingers until she felt the metal warm. She placed her hand flat on the work table and felt the grain at the edge under her palm. That touch was a simple verification of fact. When Elena spoke again, she did not ask for promises. Tomorrow we start paperwork. Tonight you rest." "We'll keep the routine," Maya answered with a single short line. "I will not reopen what I closed." She did not say it like a slogan. She said it like an administrative decision. The studio light went down to a dim lamp. Maya turned the key in the deadbolt and heard the metal fall into place. She set the locket inside her shirt and then stepped to the window to watch a car pass by. The concrete action of locking the door became the last line of the chapter. A physical, unambiguous closing that did not require words beyond the sound of the bolt. Outside the door, the neighborhood night carried on in ordinary sounds. Inside, Maya breathed and held the tangible items of the evening, a folded unsent letter, a wedding band in her pocket, a locket against her skin. The immediate threat had receded. The paper on the table and the envelope stamped with official letters remained. They would require later choices. For now she closed the studio and accepted the practical support Alina and Claire offered. Alina set the mug on the counter. Maya dropped the locket into her palm and closed the studio door with a steady hand. Daniel Hayes stepped through the crowd and stopped within arm's reach of Maya's table. Betrayal tightened her jaw before her voice could rise. "Daniel," someone said behind her, and the single syllable landed like an accusation. The pop-up hummed with customers and string lights. Maya kept her hands on the ceramic bowl she was arranging so they would not tremble. The central problem lay flat and visible now. The husband who disappeared on their anniversary was standing where she sold small prints and pottery, claiming a reason for leaving. Maya had rebuilt a life after that night. Tonight that life was measured against the man who had walked away. Maya pulled her shoulders straight and worked her mouth around a reply before speaking. She did not step back. She did not let the crowd close the space between them. She had rehearsed 3 short questions in the week since she learned Daniel might surface again. Now she would use one. "Why did you come here, Daniel?" she asked, the words short and steady. Daniel's gaze dropped to the table, then came back. He did not move like someone returning from a place of danger. He moved like someone who had checked his reflection and decided to enter anyway. "I came to talk," he said. "Maya, He stopped as Emma stepped forward, placing a hand lightly on Maya's arm. Emma's presence changed the room's shape. Emma was Maya's friend and co-organizer of the night. She knew how to read a moment and how to diffuse a public scene. "Maya," breathed Emma, but her voice did not contain pity. It contained calculation. The calculation stirred suspicion in Maya's face into guarded anger. Emma had stepped between them at the fundraiser months ago. She had also stood outside Maya's atelier the night Daniel showed up at the door. Now Emma stood in the same way, ready to protect the evening and Maya's right to run it. The crowd murmured. A man at the next stall leaned forward. A woman with a wine glass set it down. Little noises stitched the space with attention. Maya pulled her index finger along the lip of a bowl, as if the motion steadied her. She had learned to turn small gestures into anchors. "Don't make this about me." Daniel, lowering his voice. "You don't have to. Don't talk for me," Maya interrupted. Her voice was calm, but the sharpness in it cut. "Tell these people why you walked out on our anniversary, Daniel." She named the concrete wound in front of everyone. The room's attention shifted as if drawn by a magnet. Daniel's mouth tightened. He glanced at Emma, who said nothing but folded her arms in a way that told Maya she had permission to push. "You left the house at midnight," Maya added. "You took your briefcase. You didn't tell me where you were. I spent our anniversary waiting with a dinner plate growing cold." The facts landed plain and precise. No metaphors, no dramatics. The crowd could see the stakes. A marriage undone, a woman who had to rebuild a business afterward. Emma stepped closer. "Maya, you're the reason half the people here came tonight," she said. "They deserve an answer if he has one." The word answer hung. Daniel turned and pulled something from his coat pocket. A worn envelope, its corners softened by handling. He held it like a confession. A hush fell. He set the envelope on the table and pushed it toward Maya with one slow movement. "Open it, Maya," he said. "You'll see I didn't disappear by choice. I wasn't capable of asking for help then. I filed to protect something I thought I had to protect. I can show you proof." His sentences arrived clipped, each one measured as if he were managing the pace of his own remorse. Maya studied the envelope. Up close she could see the flap had a smudge of ink and a courthouse stamp. Part of her wanted to tear it away and throw it on the ground. Part of her wanted to rip it open and read every line. The emotion root in the night was betrayal. Betrayal threaded every choice she made in the first half hour. Why she had asked Daniel to explain in public. Why she had relied on Emma to stand between them. Why she kept her fingers on the bowl. That feeling pushed her into action, to force a reckoning that could be witnessed. Claire's voice at the back called, "Don't touch anything until we know what it is." Claire arrived in the doorway like a judge, hair tucked into a wool scarf. Cheeks flushed from the cold. She was Maya's younger sister and had been tracking Daniel since the fundraiser. Claire's arrival added urgency and shifted the focus from Maya's performance toward a search for documents and proof. Claire stepped forward, placed her hand on the envelope and read the top line aloud. "Filed. Protection order withdrawn." Months after departure, the sentence reframed the story in the room. The crowd exhaled. Murmurs generated like small currents. Daniel's jaw moved. "I didn't want to burden you with what I was dealing with," he said. "I thought staying away would keep you safe. I filed to make sure things were handled while I sorted it out." He searched for a name for the thing he had been trying to avoid. And his clipped sentences lost a little of their control. Maya's eyes narrowed. "You filed what?" she demanded. "Who were you protecting?" She pushed forward another concrete question. The room tightened. Emma's hand covered Maya's wrist for a heartbeat. Not to stop her, but to remind her of the weight in that wrist. Potter's habit strength from years of shaping clay. Maya refused to be spoken for. Daniel swallowed. "A shaky, partial story." He had learned of a business liability tied to his firm. He had been threatened by a man from the city. He had been told by lawyers to lie low. He had been told to withdraw his household ties. His account came in short bursts. "I thought I was protecting us," he said. "I thought I could come back once it was settled. I was wrong. I couldn't." He stopped, fingers going to the wedding band low on his finger. Claire pushed in. "You withdrew a protection order months after leaving, Daniel. That looks like planning, not panic." Her tone was blunt. She read like a clerk who knew where to point. The document she produced from her coat, photocopies, stamped pages and a photograph, rearranged the space. The photograph showed Daniel signing a paper at a municipal office 3 months after he left. The photocopy was of a letter addressed to a corporate counsel. Emma hissed. "You never told Maya any of this." Her voice held both anger and an edge of worry. "Maya, what do you see?" she asked, directing the question to the protagonist and to the room. Her line urged Maya to act rather than sink into recollection. The prompt worked. Maya unfolded the paper with fingers that didn't shake as much as she thought. Inside the envelope was a single sheet and a folded photograph. The sheet listed names, dates, and signatures. The dates followed Daniel's disappearance by weeks and months. The photograph showed Daniel in a courthouse corridor, coat buttoned, head bent over documents. A man in the photograph watched him, someone whose face Maya had never seen before. The paper shifted the audience's understanding. Daniel had not vanished into chaos. He had moved in a legal direction. Maya felt doubt roll through her like a cold draft. She had believed he simply left because he could not face their life anymore. Now doubt edged towards something closer to betrayal again. Her hands found the little gold locket under her sweater. She touched it without looking. The locket was a keepsake from their early years, something she had not taken off. That small contact grounded her. "Claire," Daniel abruptly, "you weren't supposed to come with that." His clipped voice broke into a different rhythm. The kind of tempo people slip into when panic reaches the surface. "I didn't know filing would become its own story. I thought the court would keep it sealed. I thought I could come back when it was done." He met Maya's eyes. "Maya, I never meant to leave you like that." The line landed with simple regret. But the document next to it refused to let that regret stand alone. A curious bystander leaned in. "So he planned to keep it private?" she asked. The question turned on the idea of deliberate secrecy. That shift produced the first cliffhanger of the chapter. Had Daniel orchestrated his absence, or had he been trapped by counsel and circumstance? The question made the room lean forward. Daniel admitted that he had talked to lawyers and that some filings had been made to protect corporate assets. He insisted that he had never intended to sever ties with Maya. His words were consistent, but Claire's documents and the photograph made his motive ambiguous. "You can't expect me to believe you disappeared by accident, Claire. You made a decision to act without her." Her voice left no room for softness. Maya stepped back. She had to decide whether this proof changed the whole meaning of his absence. Betrayal pushed her toward anger. Doubt pulled at her into hesitation. Clarity flickered like a light when new evidence arrived. These were the emotion shifts she felt. Betrayal to suspicion, suspicion to doubt, doubt toward clarity. Each shift showed in her hands, her breathing and the way she closed then opened her mouth. Daniel's fingers ran along the edge of his coat. He spoke more quietly. "I did what I thought would keep you safe from an investigation that could drag you into work fallout. I thought disappearing would create distance. I thought." He stopped, and this time he let the word thought carry the weight. He had not spoken of the men who made the threats, or of the firm pressure that arrived in his inbox. He had not named the person who might profit from their exposure. "Who threatened you, Daniel?" "Maya." Her line was short and precise. She demanded a name. The room vibrated with attention. Daniel hesitated and then said, "A client, a partner. I can't name him without bringing this whole thing back. I went as far as the lawyers told me. I thought withdrawing would stop them from going after you." His explanation invited skepticism. Claire pushed a step closer. "Show us the letter you sent to counsel that says you withdrew support. Show us the names. Show us anything that proves you acted under duress." She spoke in a way that made action possible. "Produce evidence or be judged." Daniel opened the envelope again and withdrew a second paper. He unfolded it. The paper contained a string of emails and a note. An attorney's recommendation to minimize exposure by distancing household ties. The note was signed. The signature matched one in the photograph. Emma's hands shook, but she kept speaking clearly. "Maya, none of us wants to decide for you. But we want you to see everything before you decide." Her line reminded Maya that this was not a private, introspective choice. It was a decision in public with witnesses who would remember the facts. Maya read the emails. The words were spare. "Reduce visibility, limit family contact, withdraw for the duration of investigation." There was a sentence that said, "We recommend temporary separation to reduce legal exposure." The writing was clinical. It described actions. It did not tell whether the separation had to be permanent. Daniel looked at Maya and said, "I thought I could come back after it was over. I thought you'd understand once I explained." He reached out his hand, slow and pained, toward the table. Maya flinched and did not take it. Claire's face hardened. You signed something that made it easier for you to leave. You filed things that show intent. Her voice carried the legal term with blunt clarity. She pushed the photograph forward so the room could see Daniel's signature. The signature did not prove malice, but it did prove deliberation. A patron at the front said, "So he chose to protect an asset instead of a person." The sentence landed like a verdict, and more heads nodded. Maya felt the room's judgment pressing against her ribs. She felt anger swell, then drain into a cold, practical decision-making place. Maya moved them into the back room. She did it simply. She took the envelope, folded the papers back together, and walked. Emma followed, Claire next, and Daniel trailed as if summoned. The change of location made the confrontation private and intense. The motion closed the distance and turned the public spectacle into a private reckoning. In the narrow back room, the lighting was a single exposed bulb. Dust motes rotated in the shaft of light. Maya closed the door and clicked the deadbolt. No dramatic pauses, just the concrete action of shutting out witnesses. She set the envelope on the small steel table and folded her hands on top of it. "Tell me everything now," she said. The sentence left no room for clipped evasions. "Start from the night you left." Her voice was even. She wanted facts, she wanted names. She wanted to watch his face while he said them. Daniel exhaled. He began the story with a date and a place. A meeting with a client in the Loop, a threat delivered in a manila envelope, threats to expose financial missteps that would entangle Maya's small business. He described visiting an attorney who advised minimizing household ties. The sentences fell into a pattern of cause and effect. They were specific about times, offices, and documents. As he spoke, Maya watched the small tremors in his hands and the way his lips pressed together on certain words. She listened for contradictions. She watched for the detail that would expose intent. Claire interjected with questions. "Why not tell me? Why not tell Emma? Why let her think you abandoned her?" Her lines were rapid and insistently factual. Daniel answered with 3 short back and forth exchanges with Claire and Emma. "I didn't want to drag you into it. You dragged yourself into it by filing to withdraw. I thought that was safer. Safer for whom?" The argument produced the rapid dialogue the chapter needed, sharp, human, and revealing. At one point Daniel paused and said, "I signed a withdrawal because the attorney said it would limit the firm's exposure. I thought it would be temporary. I didn't realize how it would look from the outside." Maya listened, then asked, "Did you ever try to call me?" He looked away. "I called once and the line cut. I left messages. The number kept going to voicemail. I couldn't risk a call that might be traced." The word traced made the scene technical, not poetic. It made the danger feel precise and describable. Claire slammed a palm on the table. "So you chose a process that made you look like you walked away. You chose it when you could have at least told us you were under legal advice. You chose method over us." Her voice cracked, but kept its aim. The emotional weight shifted now from ambiguous to accusatory. Daniel's control fractured. For the first time in the chapter his voice lost its clipped reserve. "I couldn't tell you the details without a lawyer present," he said. "I didn't think hiding would become abandonment." His hands twisted the edge of his sleeve. Maya watched him and felt anger peak. She pictured the anniversary dinner plate, the empty chair, and the slow hours she had spent waiting. She also remembered the fundraiser night when she first saw him step into a crowded room, and the way betrayal had tightened her jaw then. Now the same face stood near her pottery, asking for forgiveness that he had not earned. She one sharp, final question. "If you loved me, why didn't you leave a note? Why let me hold on to hope for months?" The question was the climax's hinge. It forced a truth from him. Daniel bent his head and said, "I thought leaving without contact would make you safer. I was ashamed of the law's suggestions. I thought I could fix it alone before I came back." He ate slowly, and in the middle of his sentence his voice broke. "I didn't think about how alone it would make you feel." The admission landed, raw and concrete. Then Claire reached into her bag and produced another paper, a copy of correspondence that showed Daniel had met with counsel, yes, but also an internal corporate memo suggesting that distancing household ties would reduce the firm's liability. The memo named dates and people. The new document reframed the narrative again. Daniel had acted with legal counsel, but corporate interest had influenced the advice. Maya's eyes moved from page to page. She felt an unexpected shift. Anger softened into a complex mix of betrayal and clarity. She had previously felt only abandoned. Now she could see the mechanisms that had led to the abandonment. That moment was an emotion shift from doubt to clarity. It did not settle everything, but it gave shape to what she needed to decide, so corporations advised him to vanish to protect assets. Emma. Her line cut through the room's hush. They chose the plan that looked clean on paper, but left a wife without answers. Emma's voice made clear who was responsible beyond Daniel. Daniel slammed his fist once on the table, then covered his mouth with both hands. "I'm sorry, Maya." His apology was not poetic. It was a simple, human compression of regret. "I am sorry for the way you were left. I am sorry I didn't find another way." The remorse was tangible. It pressed into the air. Claire's choices then altered the course of the night. Maya, you can press charges or we can file a complaint. You can demand full disclosure from his firm. Or you can walk away tonight and keep your shop and your life separate from this legal mess. Her lines were options laid out in practical terms. The decision no longer felt like a question of the heart alone. It was a legal and moral crossroads. Maya considered each option. The community around her waited. Her business depended on reputation and calm. A public legal battle could drag customers away, but walking away could mean letting corporate decisions erase the truth. Her hands folded around the locket. She thought of small, concrete things. The satchel she carried every morning, the orders stacked in her shop, the neighbor who watered her plants while she rebuilt. These were not metaphors. These were the measurements of her life. She made a choice that showed how empowerment in this story is action, not slogans. Maya picked up the wedding band Daniel had worn and set it on the table between them. She did not speak for a long breath. Then she said, "This ring is yours, Daniel. You can take it back or you can leave it here. But if you want me to believe you, you must answer Claire's questions fully and willingly. You must sign a statement that you will cooperate with any inquiry. You must stop hiding behind counsel and let me see what you saw." The sentence enumerated concrete demands instead of theatrical declarations. Daniel slid the ring across the table. He could have kept it, slipped it back on and asked for more time. He did not. He picked it up, closed his fingers around it, and then let it fall into the ceramic bowl Maya had used for donations earlier in the night. The sound of metal against clay was small but decisive. It carried the weight of a choice. He quietly, I'll do it, Maya, I'll cooperate, I'll sign. But I won't ask you to repair what I broke. I only ask." He stopped because he had no right to ask for more. Maya watched the ring fall and felt the last rise of adrenaline leave her. The crowd had been waiting for a verdict, but the verdict had become a process. She gave Daniel one last look and said, "Then do it. Prove it." She did not say welcome back. She did not say forgive me. She prove it. Outside, the room's hum returned. People drifted to their drinks and conversations as if relieved to let the private matter go. Emma guided Maya toward the folding table at the entrance and took her elbow with a steady hand. Claire stayed to sort copies, to collect evidence, and to teach Daniel how to begin the paperwork he had been avoiding. Each of them made active choices that changed the direction of the story. A neighbor, me. Alvarez, who had helped deliver boxes the week Maya opened the atelier, put a hand on Maya's shoulder. "Whatever you choose, Maya, we re-here," he said. The line was not a slogan. It was an offer of practical help, to watch the shop, to testify about her character if needed. Community became a set of actions, not an abstract balm. Hours later, after the patrons left and the string lights dimmed, Maya walked alone along the tree-lined lane. She kept her satchel over one shoulder. The sky had thinned to dusk. The ground smelled faintly of wet leaves. She walked because she needed the motion, not because of a speech. Her stride measured a new decision: to hold Daniel accountable while protecting her life. She reached the little wooden bench she and Emma sometimes used to count inventory by hand. She set the satchel down, opened it, and placed the now empty locket inside. The locket clicked softly. She sat and breathed the cold air into her lungs and let it out. Claire's text arrived then. He signed the first form. "We'll file Monday. Call me if you need me." Maya typed back 3 words. "I'm okay. Thank you." She did not promise anything beyond truth. At the gate, Maya paused and looked back toward the glow of the pop, up where a lamp still burned. The lamp lit a small rectangle on the sidewalk. In it, the bowl with the wedding band gleamed faintly. Her hand closed around the strap of the satchel. She did not look for forgiveness. She looked for the down-to-earth evidence of choices made and accountability started. She rose and walked through the lane under the bare branches. Each step was a concrete action away from the table where the ring rested and toward a life she had rebuilt with her hands and small, dependable routines. The chapter ended on that movement. She slipped the satchel strap over her shoulder and walked away from the pop-up, leaving the ring on the table and the legal process beginning in Claire's folders behind her.